So from last Wednesday until Sunday, we had the, so to say, official kickoff of the new season, or the tournament that brought all of the players back from the player break. We actually had Zoltec Cup Masters last week, or we talked about it last week, and we had it the week before. But now with this tournament, we actually have all the teams back, and almost all of the teams back in action. It's not really that it's not really the case that every team has now played a tournament once again, but almost all the teams did. And yes, a lot to unpack here, a lot to talk about. Many teams' performances can be put under the microscope. But as is tradition in this podcast, actually, or in these episodes, when I recap the tournament that has taken place the week before, I start with the winner of the tournament. And funnily enough, it is not Astralis, although they participated in the tournament, which is almost as big a tradition as the fact that I recap these tournaments in this podcast. But it is North, their Danish counterparts. And yeah, also a lot to talk about, a lot to say when it comes to them. They had a crazy tournament. It's not like this was pretty straightforward for them. Yeah, they beat Astralis twice in one tournament, which I'm not really sure when was the last time this happened. Yeah, they were the underdogs, of course, when it came to these matches. But they beat them in their group, in the winners match of their group. They then went on to beat Navi 2-0 in the quarterfinals. Then they went on to the semifinals where they faced off against Mouse Sports. Then they lost Dust 2 with 16-0 on the first map, and then afterwards came back to win the series. And then they went against Astralis in the final, and then they're actually, after just losing 16-0 on Dust 2 against Mouse Sports, then about 3 or 4 hours later, they beat Astralis on Dust 2 with a 16-1 scoreline. Yeah, and then afterwards they lost their own map pick, which was Train, and then on Overpass, where Astralis is considered the best, if not one of the best, if not the best team in the world, and they beat them there as well. So yeah, not really. There's not really it maybe doesn't really make sense when you just speak about that, and then you actually mention afterwards or before, like I did before, it was North that did all of that. So it's not like it was FaZe or it was Astralis themselves, which would have been crazy in its own right, because they don't really lose matches like this. If you think about it, they don't really lose 16-1, but then again, they now lost 16-0. The other way around, of course. They don't really lose 16-0, but then now lost 16-1 on their own map pick, actually. So does too. Yeah, what is there to say about North, though? They made a roster change, going right into the player break, or yeah, sort of. So that sort of is the timeline. Was the timeline? They replaced Mertz, their AWPer, for the time being, for the last few months, and they replaced him with Nico, not FaZe Nico, but Nico from Heroic. He was formerly from Heroic and has now moved on to North, and this is his first LAN tournament with the team, or his first major performance with the team, and this actually then in turn made MSL pick up the AWP, because now without Mertz they don't really have a dedicated AWPer again in the lineup, because Nico isn't one. But yeah, MSL picked it up, and he hasn't picked it up in a long time. He actually gave an interview with HLTV after the tournament, and he said that nobody would have expected him to do that well with the AWP, but now as he does, he has now the MVP of the. He was the finals MVP. He actually had the best scoreline in the on the whole map. He had the most kills. Definitely had the best rating in the finals, and him being an in-game leader makes this all the more worthy of being talked about. He of course had then the most AWP kills, so he won this won this duel with Device. Yeah. So when it comes to the final, MSL went ham, and then therefore obviously deserved the best MVP vote. The tournament MVP, which was actually crowned by Corsair themselves, who was the sponsor of the tournament, was Valde. So, and I actually agree with that even more. Valde had an insane tournament. Actually, when I see North and when I see them perform, or even when they are not really performing, it's always Valde who's this Mr. Reliable, who's been this guy that they can always be relied upon, who always shows up to create some sort of success for the team, even if it doesn't really work out in the end for the whole team. But yeah, Val is always the guy who actually makes sure that the team performs quite well. For the whole tournament itself, he has a 1.16 rating, which is almost the best in the team. AZ had a 1.17 rating. But nevertheless, it was mostly Valde, and of course, like now I mentioned him, AZ as well. The team actually talked about this throughout the tournament progression. That now with the pickup of Nico, AZ gets into new positions, and now it is AZ who can again shine and show that he still is that talented player that he actually is, and he hasn't been able to do that for a long time now. But now with this roster change, maybe it's time for him to do that again. Yeah, and of course this is all quite nice for them. Obviously, winning a tournament always is. Now coming from back from the player break, being the team that is in the best form of all the teams that are in contention for the major, of course, that is going to take place, or that's going to start tomorrow actually, with the first stage. But yeah, it's always I don't know how to say this, but I don't really think that this is something that is indicative of their chances for the major, because of course this is something that nobody will know until it happened. But North will now obviously have this momentum going into the major, and they will be able to take comfort in knowing that they were able to beat Astralis twice, which can't really be said of any other team in recent history. But it's my intuition that they majorly overachieved in this tournament. They I don't think I'm a rocket scientist for thinking about this, or for stating this. I'm not really a visionary, but I don't really see them performing the way that they did this time next week or in the week afterwards. It's their performance was very volatile, and I actually talked about that a few months ago when I talked about the Astralis versus FaZe rivalry, so to say. When I actually mentioned that when they lost, I think I don't really remember which tournament it was, but FaZe 3-0'd. I think it was Sydney. I hope I'm not wrong about this. In Sydney, it was FaZe taking Astralis out 3-0, and then afterwards I stated that Astralis wins this series 7 out of 10 times. And in the end, I don't really think I've been wrong about this. I don't really have the stats with these two teams in front of me right now, but more often than not, it was Astralis who either in a direct matchup against FaZe, or in matchups against other teams in tournaments where it came down to beating the other team in order to progress. It was Astralis who have been more consistent, and of course this is only one tournament, and maybe this player break was a magical 3 or 4 or 5 weeks for them. And it's not like they have performed well. They haven't performed well before, because they have won DreamHack Valencia actually before the player break. I think it was their last tournament before they went into the player break, when they still had Mixwell in the team. So it's not like this necessarily came out of the blue. But yeah, when it comes to major competition, which will obviously be waiting for them at the Faceit Major. It will be interesting to see if they can keep up with this performance. Also seeing that they had a very tough road to the final and actually to the title when, like I said, they had to face Astralis twice. They had to face Na'Vi. They had to face Mousesports. Did they? Yeah. And on that road, of course, it was tough for them, and this actually validates them even more. But on the other hand, it's insane that they did that in a way that they did it, and I don't think the way that they did it is replicable. So, of course, they beat Tai Lu in the best of one, then they beat Astralis in the group match, then they bested Na'Vi, they bested Mousesports, and then they won against Astralis as well again. And yeah, I would be surprised to say the least that if this were to happen like that again, then they would be able to do that again. Because I don't really see them. Yeah, I don't really see them as a team that is that good. I may be wrong about this, and it could be that I would be proven wrong about this. But when I think about the other teams and I think about them, then I don't think that this is something that, like I said, I'm just going to repeat myself here for one last time before I move on to a different topic. I don't think that they are to be expected to do that again like this, to replicate these performances. That's just my guess, and I think I still think that played a great tournament. They obviously were had an advantage in the fact that maybe them starting off there or coming back from the player break a few days before all the other teams did, which is a good strategy then from their part and not really luck. But this could have been an advantage for them, and the other teams not really performing to the best of their abilities, especially Astralis, who haven't played the way that we actually expect them to do. Could have been also a crucial part in the success that North had.